Shalom, holy initiates and holy adepts. Welcome to my holy channel. I'm the Chief Magician of Mystery Babylon. So this is essentially part 2 to the previous video that I just uploaded, which had everything to do with the curriculum for Lurianic initiation. Now, I'm kind of really upset right now with myself because I totally forgot to mention 2 very principal, momentous books in the previous video in regards to Lurianic initiation. So I'm doing this follow-up video to complete the previous video essentially. So I'm really upset with myself that I forgot. But essentially what I want to revert back to is, going back to Lurianic initiation, right? Let's say that you've passed through all the levels and degrees of holy initiation, which would include classical initiation. So let's say that you've passed all the degrees and levels of holy initiation all the way up to the end of classical initiation. Okay, so you've mastered and read all of the Zohar, Tikkun HaZohar, Sefer HaBahira, etc. Okay, so now you're ready to take your holy initiation to the next level, which is Lurianic initiation. The problem is, though, you've studied all of these texts for the most part in English. You've studied all of these texts through their English translations, which is fine. So assuming that you're at that level and you're wanting to take your holy initiation to the next level, right, which is Lurianic initiation, right? So then what books do you study, considering that there are not that many English translations of the Lurianic texts? Okay, and as I mentioned in the previous video, the main English translation of the Lurianic text is Chaim Vital's Eitz Chaim, which is one of the most inferior Lurianic texts, which is not a good text to begin with. You should not and do not want to begin Lurianic initiation with Sefer Eitz Chaim. It's just a pretty bad book overall. I believe personally to begin initiation, as I stated in the previous video. So then that leads to the question, okay, so if you're really serious about Lurianic initiation, what books do you study, right? Because the problem is I didn't mention any books in the previous video that are English translations that would be good books to begin holy initiation with. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of this video. Okay, so assuming that's the case of everything that I've just said, I want to mention what I consider to be the 2 most chief principal Lurianic texts in English. Okay, the first one is a very expensive book. I think it's about $300 on Amazon.com, called "Apples from the Orchard: Gleanings from the Mystical Teachings of the Arizal on the Weekly Torah Portion." Now, this book is about a 1,000-page book. It's in a really large book. I think it's about 1,000 pages. And essentially, it's a Lurianic commentary to the Torah. Now, this book is extremely invaluable, and I think it's one of the most divine, most powerful of Kabbalistic texts available to the English-speaking world. Now, the Rab who translated this book, I would say, is a pretty highly initiated Mekabel and scholar for doing a work on this scale. Okay, to begin with, because this book does include the Hebrew text. So essentially, what the Rab did was he basically translated much of much of Sefer HaPasukim and Sefer Likutim, and I can't remember what other Italian texts, but I think it's like 3 core Italian texts that he translated as part of this book. So if you remember from what I said in the previous video, quintessentially, Sefer Likutim is a Lurianic commentary. Essentially, it's the Arizal's commentary on the Torah. Okay, And of course, Sefer Pasukim would contain additional commentaries on verses from the Torah. So essentially, what this Rab did was he basically took all of the material that is commentary to the Torah from these three Italian texts and essentially compiled this Lurianic commentary on the Torah, taken straight from these three books. So essentially, this book is an English translation of about 75%, if not more, of Sefer Pasukim, Sefer Likutim, and I think another book. So this is probably the greatest and the best book that you're going to be able to get on the Lurianic Kabbalah in English, okay? Hence why it's probably very expensive. It's probably the best book, bar none. Now, what makes this book, additionally, what makes this book so invaluable and powerful is one of the problems that I see with a lot of the Lurianic texts is that we first have the foundational Lurianic texts, which are the texts straight from the chief disciples of the Arizal, which is as close to the source as you're going to get. The problem that I tend to that I've noticed and exists is that after that we have a lot of additional Mekabalim that come on the scene, and they start writing their own books trying to explain the Lurianic Kabbalah, which I think is unnecessary because the whole point of the chief disciples of the Arizal was to reveal the Lurianic Kabbalah in the best way possible through their books. Okay, so there's no need. So, for example, we have, for example, take Ramchal, right? If you saw the previous video, I mentioned how, the Ramchal's 138 openings of Chokhmah is a very inferior Lurianic text. Here he is trying to, expound and explain the Lurianic Kabbalah, which to me is completely pointless. Plus, he does a horrible, atrocious job by doing it in the first place. Okay, there's no need for it, right? What you want to do Lurianic initiation is all about going straight to the source. You want to go straight to the source, and that's the chief disciples of the Arizal. And I think that's more than sufficient, especially if you have a grandmaster initiating, such as myself. So that's what makes this book, Apples from the Orchard, so powerful and so invaluable, because it's essentially an English translation straight from the source. But it is a very advanced book. So again, this is for very advanced holy initiates and holy adepts who have the necessary prerequisite foundation for Lurianic initiation. Now, the next book, that's another 1,000-page book, is a book called The Introduction to the Book of Zohar, The Spiritual Secret of Kabbalah, Volume 1, The Science of Kabbalah. Now, this book is largely an English translation of one of the Baal Sulam's texts in expounding and explaining the Lurianic Kabbalah. Now, as regards to my personal feelings about this book, I think that a lot of it is good, and then I find huge portions of it to be rather inferior, right? So a large chunk of this book does a really good job in simplifying the Lurianic Kabbalah, making it accessible and explaining it. But I think there's also large portions that are just very technical, very advanced, and I don't think do a very good job of explaining the key concepts. And I think, I just think that large portions of this text are very inferior. It's also a fact that very momentous portions of the Lurianic Kabbalah are left out from this book, so which begs the question: did the Baal Sulam truly read Sefer, Amak Hamalach? Did he truly read and master that book? Because there's a lot in that book that's not contained in this book. So, all in all, I wouldn't say it's the best book on the Lurianic Kabbalah. It's certainly not the worst. So it's probably somewhere in between. So I definitely do consider it a somewhat inferior text. So I would primarily focus on acquiring and accessing Apples from the Orchard. I consider this to be probably the best book to study from. And I think owning the other book is also good as well. I think there's, both of these books are over 1,000 pages and have a tremendous wealth of knowledge and wisdom regarding the Lurianic Kabbalah. So you can't go wrong in purchasing these two books. So these are the two books that you want to own, you want to purchase if you're serious about taking your initiation to the next level. Two final points are that, The significance and quintessence of the Lurianic Kabbalah is that it's all about helping you understand the Zohar. The Zohar is a sealed book, right? Most Jews, the vast majority of Jews, are humble enough to tell you that when they read the Zohar, they don't really understand what they're reading. It's the same thing with the Goyim. Many Goyim purchase English translations of the Zohar. They read it and they're like, oh man, this stuff is so advanced. I don't fully understand it. The vast majority of people that are going to read the Zohar are not going to fully understand it. It's a sealed text. And that's the whole point of the Lurianic Kabbalah. The Lurianic Kabbalah comes on the scene for the first time to fully and properly explain much of the knowledge and wisdom in the Zohar, right? That's the major prerequisite for the Lurianic Kabbalah, is mastery and reading the Zohar. So during the course of Holy Initiation, you first want to read the entire Zohar, even if you don't understand it. You want to get a good sense of the text, a good memory of the overall text. Then when you get into Lurianic Initiation is going to actually help you, understand much of what is contained in the Zohar. And so the whole point of the Lurianic text is that they are to be studied side by side with Sefer HaZohar and Sefer Tikkunei HaZohar. That's the whole point of this Holy Initiation. The last point is that I've included the links to purchase these two books below in the description box. And a further final note is that the second book, Introduction to the Book of Zohar, The Science of Kabbalah, is actually available free online, and I also have a link for the free online version, but I still recommend purchasing the book nevertheless. So with that said, Shalom wa Salah.